as a candidate, you need to make sure that you're very much communicating exactly what you want. If they don't, don't try to have someone guess at
Hmm.
what the number you're going to be excited about or the number that is acceptable. Make sure you're very clear in your communication all along. I'm Graham,
And I'm Corinne.
and welcome to the Too Talented Podcast. In this episode, we're going to talk about money and how to negotiate at the end of the process. And there are definitely some hurdles and challenges that you face during that time. So we're going to talk about some of those. And then there's some definite best practices as you go through. So to get started here, Corinne, what's going on with you? What's new in running and life and work?
Running is kind of chill right now. I'm doing some aerobic weeks, or a week at least of aerobic running at just really relaxed paces as I come back from Javelina 100K. Just got to let the body recover and all the systems get back online appropriately. And so I think you just have to honor that. And it's a really strange thing when you run really far and then you can't run hardly at all and you feel like increpid, and it's like, wait, I'm in peak fitness but I feel like I can't move at all. So that's an interesting thing, but actually I'm feeling pretty good. Definitely still some deep fatigue in my muscles and stuff when I'm out there, and I'm like, oh man, I'm running fast right now, and then I look down and I'm actually not running fast. But I feel pretty good, and it's great weather right now in Colorado, so it's been really nice to be outside, just getting some easy miles in. And then I'm coaching a bunch of athletes. Just had another call this morning with a coaching client, and that's really exciting because I think I was telling you that I have a lot of diversity amongst my athlete roster, which is really cool. There's a lot of different people, different backgrounds, ages, personalities, doing really cool things out there, and it's fun to help guide their journey. How about you? What's going on?
I'm kind of in the same boat as you from a running perspective. I had a little injury coming out of the 100-mile attempt and with my ankle, so I've been kind of letting that heal, and it seems to, for the most part, to be settled down. So I've been kind of taking it easy, just like you, running like, oh yeah, I'm feeling like I'm going pretty fast, and then you look down at the next mile split, and you're like, no, I'm not going very fast. That's all right. Just kind of rebuilding and kind of coming back from a kind of cardio perspective. So that's good. And then from a work perspective, it's been actually a pretty busy couple of weeks. Did a bunch of recruiting last week, and then trying to set some interviews this week, and doing a lot of business development outreach because I've got extra time to do that right now in between kind of recruiting projects. And then I've got another kind of sounds like big recruiting project upcoming starting mid-November, so that'll probably slow down some of my BD efforts, which is, and it's all you, and it's just me doing everything. It's kind of the
You
push and
need to
pull.
define BD.
Oh, business development efforts, trying to kind of get more clients for, especially next year. It seems like kind of with the projects that I've got in front of me right now, that should take care of this year and maybe kind of first part of next year. So I'm trying to kind of build what my 2026 projects look like. Yeah, so it's been exciting.
Has it snowed in Colorado yet?
No. I was listening this morning. I follow a weather guy on Instagram because, of course, I do. And he was saying that Nashville, Tennessee, maybe for the first time in history, might get snow before Denver does, which has
Wow.
never happened before, at least in
Oh
recorded
my
history.
gosh, that's kind of a fun fact. But
Kind of a
I
fun
feel like
fact.
maybe it has like well, no, has it not even a pie?
But yeah, it snowed like, yeah,
Yeah,
in the mountains it
but
snowed.
in Denver
In
proper, yeah.
Denver. Yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. No, I mean, some of the ski areas are starting to get open just with the snow that they're making. So yeah, I mean, there's been some snow and cold temperatures up high, but I'm talking like where we live.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's
So
get into this to the negotiation conversation.
yeah, for sure. And it's funny, we were, as we were talking about this outline, you've got a lot of kind of pretty interesting things because I think you've seen kind of a lot of things from the salary negotiation side, maybe even more so than me. I think the volume of candidates that you've talked to about this is probably higher than mine because, being in an agency, the volume of offers made are going to be lower than if you were in talent acquisition. But one of the things that we were discussing, and we can start here first, is, the old adage of the first to talk money loses. I think really, I mean, it's kind of out of date from a very particular perspective, because one of the things that happens early, especially when you're talking to like a recruiter working for a company, talent acquisition person, one of the in the initial screens parts of the things that they're going to do is cover compensation, making sure that the candidate they're talking to at least somewhat aligns to the pay band. Corinne, why don't you kind of talk more about that?
Yeah, so I think that, it's something that is just really important to determine early in the process from both sides. And it may even, have somewhat been determined prior to you having a conversation, because there are states that require, by law, an employer to post a salary range. That is a law that in Colorado came up. I don't know, now maybe it was 2020 or so somewhere around that time frame. It might have even been a little bit later, but I remember, I think I was working at Cologix, at a data center company, Cologix, and we were talking about this was a new law, and so we were going to have to put it on all of our job postings. And there's this internal debate about, well, do we put a really wide range so that we can capture everybody on both ends of the spectrum that we want to entertain for this? Or do we put something very specific so that we don't have to tell candidates, like, maybe you don't qualify for the top end of this range? And it's an interesting strategy from an internal standpoint. We saw companies posting things like 50K to 400,000 for a range for jobs, right? That's basically their way of getting around it. But then you have to discuss with the candidate, like, okay, well, where and why do they fall in that range? So it could be determined before you even start. If you're in one of these states, it may be posted on the job posting what the salary range is. And in a way, that's great. Like, okay, I am looking to make 150,000. This job pays 80,000. I'm not even going to apply to it. So it's a great way for both sides to understand from the get-go, if it makes sense. But that first initial screening, and sometimes it doesn't happen, which really confuses me, but I think it absolutely should, by the end of that conversation, there should be a question from the recruiter, like, what is your target salary? What are you looking to be making in this next role? There are also states that you're not allowed to ask, what did you make? And that is in place for a purpose, because we, are not there. We want it to be an equitable marketplace. And therefore the goal is, I'm not going to pay you based on what you made last job, if what the appropriate market rate is $20,000, $30,000 higher. So you don't get pigeonholed into, I was underpaid in my last role, or I was there for 10 years and I only got incremental increases and that kind of thing. So usually you're going to hear from a recruiter, like, what is your target salary? And then how would you respond to that, Graham, if you were in the candidate's position?
Absolutely. So I would answer that question with a question. And I think that this is a best practice for anybody in the interview process. But I think I would ask, well, before I answer that question, do you think you could tell me what the overall range of this particular position is? And that way, you're kind of asking them before you answer, give me the parameters I'm working with here. And then, likely they're going to tell you. I mean, would you see any circumstance where a recruiter wouldn't tell you what the range was?
I mean, they might push back again and say, well, what are you wanting to be making? We have a flexible, range for this role. So like, you could go back and forth a bunch of times. Personally, I would be much more apt to then throw out a number specifically versus a range. Whenever I would say a range, yeah, that sounds great. I'm looking for the top end of that range. Like, it's really easy to just say, oh, this pays 80 to 100,000 base. Great. I'd love to be in the top end of that range, because of course you would. And so from the negotiation side on the other, from the internal side, or the company side, might just put out an exact number. That would be my best practice. And that number likely would be something either in the middle of the range or something that I think aligns to probably that candidate's experience level. So
Okay.
if it was an
So,
eighty to $100,000 range, for example, and they said, "Well, what is the range for this position?" I would say we're really trying to fill this role around $90,000 base. Is that something that would work for you?
and I think the way I would respond if I had a specific number that someone threw out, I'd say, great. I'm somewhat close to that, but I think it's worth continuing the conversation based on that. So I don't think I would ever answer and pin myself down, but I would tell them that yeah, that number's around what I'm targeting.
Yeah, and I think that's appropriate, and I think that's probably good for both sides because the goal this early on is to figure out, are you in the ballpark? Like
Right.
it's
You don't
it,
want to. Nobody wants to be wasting time. If you're way outside, it's good for the candidate and the company to know that's the case.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So it's just really you're trying to get a feel for, is it in the ballpark, and should we keep moving through the process, and then get more prescriptive as you go on.
And there could be times where, like, let's say this is a very niche skill set and the candidate has, a very niche skill set. There's a chance that the position maybe pays lower than what the candidate's looking for. But there could be times when the company might flex on that, maybe upgrade the position to the next level to be able to get to where this candidate's going to be. So as a candidate, if someone says, hey, this position, we're really trying to stay at 90K, and let's say I'm really targeting 130, that's a big delta. So, but I might just say to them, hey, I'm looking for a good bit higher than that. So if you guys are really set at 90K, it's probably not going to work. But if then the recruiter comes back and says, well, hey, we've been looking for this position for 3 months. You seem to have a lot of what we're looking for. There is a chance we could go up in compensation if we're able to level up the position. If that were to be the case, would you be more interested? So if that were to happen, you can continue the conversation. So as a candidate, I'd never want to shut down the conversation just based on the very initial number, because there's a chance that it could move.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, budgets move, but budget processes, levels of positions, and like you're saying, they may be open and willing to make it a senior systems engineer versus a systems engineer two, or just a standard systems engineer for the right candidate, and so then it just becomes like, well, do I have skills or experience or technical certifications that go above and beyond what I was, what's on that job description.
For sure. I think one of the other things that would be good to mention is kind of the best practice if the recruiter gives you a range. Hey, I'm looking to pay between 80 and 100, and you're in that range. So the way I would answer that question would be, great, I'm very much within that range. I'd like to keep the conversation going. So you can still answer that question without pinning yourself down to a specific number.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You don't have to decide on the offer at that point in time. Yeah.
Yeah. One other thing that I'll call out here, and it's kind of a good place to kind of throw it in there. So I had a candidate one time who was later in their career. They had a lot of experience. And from the get-go, I had told them very specifically what the number actually gave them a range, what the range on the position was. And I wasn't, I was very honest, and not everybody's going to be as transparent as maybe I am about the numbers, but, I typically want people to have a really good idea of where this offer is going to come in at. So I told them all along the range on the position, kind of from the bottom to the top, and they were good to keep going. And then we got to the offer phase, and the number came in kind of right towards the top end of the range. And when I presented the offer to them, they were like, oh my gosh, I mean, that's way lower than I was thinking. And I was like, okay, how's that possible? Since we've talked all along about this being the number. He's like, oh, I thought you were lowballing me the whole time, and you were going to come back with an appropriate offer. So one thing that's really important as a candidate, you need to make sure that you're very much communicating exactly what you want. If they don't try to have someone guess at what the number you're going to be excited about or the number that is acceptable. Make sure you're very clear in your communication all along, because the whole deal fell apart at that moment. I mean, the candidate ended up saying, well, this is like a slap in the face, which it was just a very kind of bizarre thing. And it was because maybe in other experiences they had had, they said a number and the company came back much higher than that. That doesn't happen very often. I mean, I've seen it happen a couple of times, but it's rare. So making sure you communicate effectively through the process of exactly what you're looking for is really important.
Yeah. And what a waste of time for that person, like not to have figured it out early or to be open early to sharing that, yeah, I'm really looking for this. Like, one thing, if it is an external recruiter, I think you might, validate this that or agree with this that it's in your best interest. Well, and it is for the internal recruiter too, but to really be open and honest about the rates and you as an external recruiter are also, you want to make that person as much as you can for the appropriate level of experience they have. And so you're their advocate in that. And so that therefore there's not a lot of reason that you would be kind of wishy-washy on or inauthentic or around what the real numbers are.
Yeah, it's true for sure. I mean, I think one of the things that I've heard lots of times is recruiters say, well, I'm going to try to get you as much as I can because the more money you make, the more money I make, because the recruiter tends to make a percentage of that. I don't actually buy that argument, and I never use that because if I'm trying to quote unquote close this deal, I $18,000 is much better than $0, and 18,000 versus 20,000, I'd rather go with the sure bet at 18,000 than try to really push for the 20. So it's your job as a candidate to make sure that your recruiter is asking for the dollar figure that you're looking for, not just trying to push you down to kind of quote unquote close the deal. So make sure that you are advocating for yourself in this case. Because at the end, the recruiter may not do a great job of pushing the envelope, trying to get as much money as possible. And they may guide you. You may say, hey, I got the offer here, but I'm really looking for this. What do you think? Listen to the recruiter because they may come back and say, hey, look, I know this client. There's no way they're going to go higher. And if you push it too hard, they may rescind the offer. Okay, well, then take that. But if you are really needing that extra money, now's the time to advocate and ask those questions.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, it's like the best practice is for both sides to be making, an appropriate, paying an appropriate amount and the candidate making an appropriate salary for what that skill set is and where the market is, because that is going to result in them staying long term and also not, it not being inflated. And so it just is I think, yeah, both sides are trying to land on a number that is going to be the right one for kind of the long term.
For sure. So I think one of the things that I always prep my candidates to do towards the end, like right after the last interview, or what we think is the last interview, you never know. But, getting an idea in your mind, kind of from a mental standpoint, coming up with a number that you would be really excited about and you'd be jumping up and down. Coming up with a number that you would accept that you feel like is high enough for this role, and coming up with the kind of lowest you'd possibly accept, but you'd likely want to negotiate with them. Coming up with that range of numbers in your mind will help you kind of compartmentalize when it comes in. Because if you get an offer and it comes in way low, like lower in your basement, you can try to negotiate it, but there may be a disconnect that, who knows why it came in this low, or, sometimes I've had clients before kind of lowball just to see what would happen, which that's kind of a challenging situation for the candidate and the recruiter. But, it does happen. So kind of understanding where you're at with things. And then I would also get a walkaway number. Like if it doesn't get to here, I walk away. There are some times where you just need the job right now and you're unemployed and maybe there is no walkaway number. But if you're gainfully employed and you're making a move from company to company, coming up with that walkaway number is important.
Perfect. Yeah, I love that ahead of time. So number 1, an excited number, number 2, acceptable, and number 3, basement number. And then you'll have that to objectively look at before you get the offer.
Yep, exactly. And that'll help you hopefully mentally be prepared to, which action to take once it comes through. Mm-hmm. Second thing, from a best practice standpoint, is kind of evaluating the full offer. So if you are going to negotiate, and let's say it comes in at the very lowest that you would accept. When you start the kind of counter offer that you would like to propose to them, and if it does come in the basement, I would suggest that, making sure that you start the conversation with kind of a lot of gratitude. Obviously, they like you enough to make you an offer. It was just a little lower than you were looking for. I would say, hey, thank you very much for the offer. I really appreciate it, and I can see myself working here. One thing I wanted to ask, if there was any flexibility in the base salary number. I was hoping to actually be at and then put out a counter number that they would need to get to. So if you can give them something to shoot for, you should get you should know pretty quick. If someone comes back and says, absolutely not, there's no way we can get above this number, then and then you'll have some kind of choices to make. But in a lot of cases, companies will be able to come up. They may not get all the way to the number that you propose, but they may get about halfway there, maybe try to split the difference. So make sure the number you propose is maybe a little higher than the acceptable range that you were kind of thinking about before.
Yeah. And I think from the other side of it, if you say that is a bit lower, is there any flexibility? I, as a recruiter, may try to kind of close you on, I can go back and talk to the team and see what we have from a budget standpoint. If we get to, so let's use an example, 80 to 100,000 was the range. You interviewed, you got to the final stages. We made you an offer of 85,000 base salary. And again, we're going to talk about the full package, but 85,000 base. So you say, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the offer. It's a bit lower than I was hoping. Do you have any flexibility? I may, as a recruiter, say, I'm willing. I can totally go ask. I certainly can discuss it with the hiring team. If we were able to get to 90,000 base, is that something that you would accept? Or I might say, if we're able to get to 87,000 base, is that something you would accept? And then what would you do as the, or I might just say, I can go ask and then I'll get back to you. Like, it depends. But it is an opportunity to kind of anticipate ending those negotiations. Like, look.
For sure.
Here we are. You're negotiating. Or I could say, what is the number that you need to accept? What, that kind of thing. Because it's also like, sometimes, depending on the company, these negotiations take time to get approval for and go through a whole, so you don't want to go back and forth and do this like 2 or 3 times. That's just kind of wastes everybody's time and is annoying. So I think the counter offer, you should be pretty specific and thoughtful on, yes, that's a number I would sign the deal at.
Yes, I totally agree. I mean, I think you as the candidate, if you throw a number back saying, hey, if you can get to, in your instance of 80 to 100, the offer comes in at 85. If you go and say, could you get to 90? And they come back with 90, it's bad form to say, okay, give me 3 days to think about it. Because, you've now thrown it out there. So basically what you're saying is you need to throw a number out that they're going to come back with that number and you're going to accept on the spot. That's the kind of way you should be approaching this.
Yeah. You can also bring up, things in that maybe that warrant the, and I guess we're going to talk about that later too, but
but we can get into it now. It just dovetails.
Yeah. So that's a little lower than I was expecting, and bring some rationale as to why you weren't higher. I have, because I have X certification, I'm really hoping you guys can be more in the 95,000 base range.
I agree. I think justifying
because then you're giving your recruiter a tool to go back to the hiring team and say, we presented this offer. They're countering. Just as a reminder, they have exactly what we're looking for here, or they have 5+ more years experience than what we were looking for in the job description. And so I think that's probably warranted. You're helping them build the case for you.
For sure. I mean, maybe it's, hey, I just received 2 certifications in the last 6 months, which is why I believe I warrant a little more money than maybe you threw out there to begin with.
Yeah. And you can also negotiate on the other pieces of the offer. So, I mean, when you're saying maybe, that I appreciate that offer. If you're trying to get more, is there any flexibility in the salary, or other components? You could say, or other parts of the offer. There could be flexibility on the bonus structure. It could be something where if they're, depending on the sophistication level of the comp department within the company, they could have the ability to say, okay, well, let's put let's make this roll a 15% annual target bonus instead of a 10%. And that is still meaningful additional compensation. Or they could be able to adjust the equity or the stock options. They could be able to adjust the time off. Instead of 2 weeks, we're going to give you 3 weeks of time. Those are all things that, you could say, is there any way we can get creative on, the terms of this or the components of it?
Yeah, for sure. And I think a couple other things that they could throw in there and then you could ask for as well is, so you got 2 certifications. Maybe there's one other certification that makes you even stronger for the role. Asking if they would offer some type of reimbursement for that certification. Or there could be simple stuff like, hey, do you guys offer like a stipend so I can improve my work from home office and make it look more professional? Or could it be like, do you offer, could you throw in a gym membership or something along those lines? There's a lot of different things that you can ask for that they may be able to do that could be outside of the compensation.
Yeah. Cell phone reimbursement.
Yep. For sure.
These are all things that, definitely can kind of be added in or potentially negotiated.
Yeah. And I think in any negotiation, there's 2 things that I would suggest everybody have the kind of in mind is one, win-win. The candidate wins, the company wins. So making sure that you're not trying to like nickel and dime everything you can get out of the company. Think it from the standpoint of you do have to go then work with these people. So you don't want to give them a black eye in the negotiations. So it's a little awkward afterwards. So making sure that you keep kind of a high level of enthusiasm and gratitude for staying in the process while you guys negotiate this whole thing, I think is great. And then also, shoot, I lost the second part. Well, let's just say there was no second part. I was just saying enthusiasm. So, yeah.
You can edit that out.
Yeah, right. For sure.
Yeah.
So, kind of.
We jumped around a little bit between building your case, thinking about the full package, kind of counter offers and going back and forth. But I think, to round it out, like maybe, we just talk about like the very end of it and kind of closing the deal and what that looks like once you've decided on something.
Yeah. One last thing that I just wanted to kind of just throw out there. There are going to be various people listening to this podcast. So the last kind of hard stuff that I wanted to cover would be per like level that you're at, the level of negotiation. There's more room if you're more of a senior or an executive than there would be if you're entry level. If you're entry level, yeah, I mean, sure, you can ask if they could increase the compensation a little bit. Don't expect a huge amount, but sometimes companies see it as a benefit if you ask for a little more money. They may not be able to get to it, but as you get into the mid-level and more senior levels of your career, that's when I think there are more negotiation pieces. There are more things in the deal that I think, from an equity standpoint or from, perks, so to speak, like a gym membership, those are kind of more easily negotiated. When you're entry level, it's almost like you're just kind of lucky to be here. And you shouldn't feel like that, but there's not as much that they're going to give you from an entry level position as there would be in a mid-level or senior level position.
Yeah, and that makes sense because you don't have as many levers to pull on of things that you add or could bring to the role. I will also say, just having recruited in sales for probably a decade of my career, that if someone does not negotiate, it actually reflects poorly on them and how they're going to do in their job. So I would always use that as a reason. This manager might be annoyed. Oh man, they're doing counteroffer. Do you want them to do this negotiation in their job and try to secure the best, deal with the client they're negotiating with? Then this is a good thing. Like this is actually like and it's okay. We can go back and tell them no, but I see this as a positive for how they're going to do in their job, that they are negotiating on the salary, because that is part of their job. So I think, yeah, it's also like, don't feel like you're necessarily going to offend people if you try to negotiate, and that then it plays into your suggestion on making sure that you're still grateful. It's a collaborative thing. It's not a me against you thing. It's a let's just keep discussing this, but I really want to make it work kind of approach to it.
For sure. You wanted to kind of move to kind of wrap things up here. Did you want to talk through kind of the checklist, or what were you thinking in that regard?
Yeah, just kind of at the very end of this, like you're going to go back and forth. Maybe you get a counter or an offer, maybe you don't. Something else that you might experience is that when they make you the offer, they may tell you this is our best and final offer. Like, here we'd love to make you an offer. This is what we can do. If they say something like this is best and final, then trust that it is, and don't, then you just need to decide, is it going to work for you or not? Or, in that second round, then they might come back and say, okay, we've countered, you did this. I was able to increase it by 3,000. And this really is our best and final. Then it's kind of like, okay, let's, then I'm just going to sit down and decide whether or not this is the right thing for me. And, when you are making that decision, yes, the salary is important and it needs to make sense, but I would suggest also really making a list of, pros and cons around what you are looking for, the opportunity that it presents, and the other things that are non-monetary that you are going to get from this role. I really like this manager. I want to work with them. Some of those things that can help you make that decision, because they all do play into what, whether or not you're going to be happy with it at the end of the day. So make sure you're thinking about the salary piece and the whole package, but also all of the other components. This is a great commute for me. This is exactly in the industry that I want to be in. And make sure that those also are considered when you're deciding whether or not you're going to accept.
For sure. No, and I think that's a great place to kind of close it right there, is kind of covering through those last pieces and making sure as you get the offer, starting with, as we talked about, making sure that you've got a kind of a high, medium, and low in terms of your expectations, also being ready to justify if you're going to make a counteroffer as to why, and then being ready to accept if they meet your counter or they can get close to it, and then really understanding if they come back with the best and final, take them at their word. This is a best and final, especially if they've come up in compensation, and being ready to accept on the spot, I think is a really important part.
Yeah. And then I think you can expect to get, or you can ask, when can I expect to get an offer letter or the final offer letter? Usually that's also going to be sent electronically for you to sign. Then you're probably going to have other onboarding paperwork. But I would ask at that point, like, what does the rest of the onboarding process look like? Just so you know. And if there's things that are not part of that you're curious about, that's your opportunity to, I want to meet with, say something like, I'd love to talk to somebody about benefits, and they can connect you with somebody if you have more questions around those kinds of things, or the long-term incentive opportunities and things like that. So then you're just going to probably do a bunch of paperwork. And I think maybe, it might be a good idea to also send a follow-up, if you're working mostly with HR or recruiting team, to, also send a follow-up note to your future manager and just say, hey, I'm very excited to be coming on board. Please let me know if you need anything from me in the meantime while I go through the paperwork, and just keep that connection. I think that's a great place to start.
I totally agree. I think it's a great place to start. Well, thank you for joining the Two Talented podcast. We talked about how to negotiate your salary. If you liked what you saw, give us a follow wherever you listen to podcasts, or if you're on YouTube watching us, click the like and subscribe button. We're putting out shorts and then the full-length episodes. So if you like what we're doing, let us know. And as always, if you have questions, send us a note either on LinkedIn, or you can go to our website. Two Talented is part of the Stride Staffing website, so it's stridestaffing.com. And you can find us there. Send us questions. We'd love to answer some on the pod.
Yeah, I think we'll probably share this with everybody, including all the athletes or the ultra running community. It's contract season right now, and this might be beneficial for people that are negotiating athlete sponsorships as well as jobs. So yeah, hopefully it was helpful, and thanks so much for listening.
Thank you.